Hi, this is Lauren, and today we're going to talk about lateral movements, and I'm hoping to demystify them for you, so to speak. Lateral movements can be quite confusing for those of you that aren't familiar with the terminology. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about what and why, and then for each lateral movement, there's going to be a diagram and a couple of examples for you. And so the main thing in this video that I'm trying to accomplish is, like I said, just to help you get familiar with the terminology and the definitions and understanding which is which. So you are not getting confused if I throw out a term shoulder in or something like that. You know what I'm talking about. In this particular video, we're not really going to cover how to do each one or how to train it or anything like that. This is more so a lecture instead of a lab, so to speak. So in later videos, we'll cover each of the movements and how to train them and various examples. But for right now, I just want you to, like I said, familiarize yourself with each of the maneuvers and their definitions. Take the time to look through the diagrams, and hopefully you'll have a much better understanding of lateral movements and they won't seem quite so mysterious to you. To start with, what is a lateral movement? Well, the definition of lateral movement is simply forward and sideways. Okay, so when we throw out the phrase lateral movements, that just is meaning any maneuver in which the horse is moving forward and sideways. Now, what's really important is that you understand why we do lateral movements, okay? Otherwise, if you don't understand the purpose of them, it may seem like a whole bunch of nonsense to you, but it actually is really, really important. And that's one thing that in a lot of Western disciplines, or really any discipline outside of dressage, can oftentimes be lacking, is that purpose of lateral movements, in that it's building up strength, suppleness, flexibility, and just overall making a more athletic horse that's better able to do any job asked of it. So we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about why we do lateral movements. Okay, so first off, I think everybody can agree that horses are naturally crooked, just like humans are left-handed or right-handed. They're just naturally prefer one side to the other. One side is stronger, the opposite side tends to be more flexible. Okay, so, but in order to carry weight properly and to be healthier and more athletic and be sounder into their old age, it's much better for the horse to be balanced and be equally strong and supple on both sides. Okay, so for example, I want to give you a demonstration so you have a really good understanding of what straightness is. Okay, so like for example, in this picture here, you can see that the horse's left hind leg is walking on the same line as the left front leg, and the horse's right hind leg is walking on the same line as the right front leg. Okay, now this is something important that's going to come up in the lateral movements. These are called tracks. Okay, so a straight horse is moving on two tracks. This is very important. Take note. The left hind and left front are on one track, and the right hind and right front are on another track. Okay, straight horse moves on two tracks. Now, the horse in this picture is on a straight line, and then in this diagram is demonstrating straightness on a circle. So, which sounds like a silly term. You may not really understand straightness on a circle, but that's the point of this diagram here, is that the horse, even on a circle, it doesn't matter whether they're on a circle or a straight line or a curved line or whatever, the straight horse is always moving on two tracks. So you see there's two horses represented with the red dots, showing that their hind end is not quite tracking up under the front, whereas the blue dots up on top is demonstrating a straight horse, where the left hind is stepping on the same line as the left front, and the right hind is stepping on the same line as the right front. So even on a circle, the horse is moving on two tracks. So the purpose of the lateral movements is to straighten the naturally crooked horse. Okay, so we take the strong side and we make it more supple and more flexible, and we take the weaker but supple side and we make it stronger. And this goes for each hind leg and also over the top line, okay, the muscles that run along the top of the horse's back. We also, through these exercises, want to be constantly transferring weight onto the horse's hind end. So not only are we balancing them from left to right, but we're also balancing the horse front to back, okay? Because the horses naturally carry weight on their front end, which is not built in a way to support weight properly. And that's where you have a lot of soundness issues with horses as they get older, because they've been carrying all their weight on their front end, which is not designed to be carrying the weight. If you can get the horse to rock their weight back on the hind when they're being ridden, because the hind end is made like a loaded spring, and it can just really coil up and take that weight really well. That's where your suspension is. So we're also getting the horse to shift the weight back onto the hind, which is better suited for carrying the weight. And you're going to have a much healthier, again, and more sound horse because of that. So each movement we're working on, like I said, and just repeat myself one more time so that you know that you guys are really getting a good understanding of this. We're suppling the strong side, we're strengthening the weak, flexible side, and we're rocking the weight back on the hind. So that's the purpose of these exercises, okay? And again, that's just really our ultimate goal, is a overall balanced, strong, supple, athletic horse that is better able to do any job asked of it. So it is completely irrelevant what kind of riding you do, what discipline you do, what saddle you use. It does not matter. This is for every horse of every style of riding, okay, to make them more athletic and better able to do any job asked of them. Now, before we jump into each of the maneuvers, I'd like to make sure that you guys are going to have a good understanding of the diagrams. Okay, so I'm going to kind of give you your bearings a little bit. This is a picture or a diagram of a straight horse. So we're just talking about straightness. The straight horse is on 2 tracks. Okay, so like I said, I want you guys to get your bearings a little bit. Each diagram is showing 2 phases of a movement, so to speak. Okay. So think of it as the same horse in the same movement, but it's just showing it at 2 different stages, okay? So the black circles are the horse's left legs, okay? You got the left front and the left hind. The red circles are the horse's right legs. You've got the right front and the right hind. Now, in some of the examples in hands that I'll show you, the polo wraps on the horse's leg match these colors. So just to kind of, like I said, help you get your bearings a little bit. The straight blue line on the side is the rail, and that's because some of the movements are somewhat dependent on where the rail is, or more so where the horse is in relationship to the rail, okay? And more importantly, though, what I really want you to look at is that purple squiggly line in the middle is the horse's bend. And this is important because one of the things that I want to clarify for you is that the inside, anytime that I refer to an inside leg or an inside rein or anything, the inside is always the side towards which the horse is bent. And then the outside is the other side. It has nothing to do with the rail, okay? A lot of times when students first start, a lot of instructors say, well, the inside is the inside of the arena. And that's okay for starting out because it's simple and it gives you a good focal point. But really, once you progress past just the most basic of riding, you really need a better understanding of being able to bend the horse on the inside and the outside. So in each maneuver, anytime that I reference the inside, look at that purple curved line, and that's going to tell you the direction that the line is curved towards. That's the inside, and then the opposite would be the outside, okay? It doesn't matter where the rail is, if that makes sense. Now then on the second half, over on your right side of your screen there, you can see that there's some dotted lines drawn through the circles, and there's numbers on them. Those are the tracks, okay? So you've got the right legs are on track number 1, and the left legs are on track number 2, okay? And the arrows also is the other thing. The arrows are indicating the direction of movement, okay? So if you there's a leg that's stepping under or sideways, because it is lateral movements, and so it's just going to help clarify for you which legs are stepping sideways in which direction. Okay, now for each movement, and I want you to remember this, for every movement is defined by the number of tracks and the bend. If you know the bend and the number of tracks, you know what the movement is. Okay, that's what defines it. More important than anything else is what defines if that movement is a shoulder in or a reverse shoulder in or a haunches in or whatever. Okay? Now, one more point before we jump in that I want to make to you is that these maneuvers are in order, okay, and they're in an important order. And as we go through, you'll see how the horse gets physically developed throughout the training of lateral movements. And it's important that you think of yourself in when you're doing the lateral movements in classical dressage, that you think of yourself as the horse's fitness trainer. Okay, like if you go to a gym and you hire a fitness trainer to help you get fit, whatever you're working on, strength, flexibility, and all that, it's the same exact thing. So you want to think of yourself as your horse's fitness trainer, that you're helping your horse become balanced, strong, and flexible. Okay, so it's not necessarily so much about just your horse learning to do something. Obviously, they are learning to do the maneuver, but once they've learned how to do it, it takes repetitions of doing that in order for them to build up the strength and flexibility. It's not just that once they've learned it once, then you can move on and be done with it. It's that you are continuing to constantly repeat it throughout your training, really throughout your horse's entire career, so that you continue to foster the strength and flexibility that your horse needs. Now, the first maneuver is the leg yield. And this is just the very basic, most basic of your lateral movements. And all you're really doing, as the name suggests, is teaching the horse to move off of your leg. So look at the diagram here. You can see the horse is moving towards the left. Okay, you look at the arrows and you see the horse is moving forward and left. And if you look at the right side of your screen, you can see that the horse's right legs, the right hind and right front, that are those red circles there, are crossing over the black circles, which are the horse's left legs. Okay, so that's really important. That's the whole point of this maneuver, is that the horse's inside legs are crossing over the outside. Okay, and so you're just starting to get your horse used to the idea of crossing his legs over and moving off of your leg when you ask. Okay, so that's very important. Before you can go on to your other lateral movements, you need to have that obedience to your leg, as well as your horse being comfortable with moving his legs, crossing them over. One point that I do want to make is that in a leg yield, you don't really have a lot of bend. So I do have that purple curved line in there because there is flexion. And all that means is that you have some tip of the nose. Okay, you can see your horse's inside eye. So you have some flexion, but this is not a bending exercise. You're going to keep your horse relatively straight through their body. But again, I wanted to have that curved line there so that you could tell the difference what was the inside and what was the outside. Now let's go ahead to a couple of examples. So here the horse is leg yielding to the right, and even though she's along the rail, it still is a leg yield because she's on 4 tracks and she's moving forward and sideways. Now here's a leg yield towards the rail. You can clearly see the inside legs crossing over. And then here's a leg yield away from the rail. And again, really pay attention. The inside, which in this case is the left, see how that left front and left hind leg crosses over the right legs? And here's one at a trot. And again, you can really see that left hind leg crossing over. Now, one thing that I do want to make a point of, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that a leg yield and a half pass is the same thing. And so I do want to just kind of clear that up a little bit. The leg yield, as you recall, you can look back at the diagram if you need to. The leg yield is the horse is moving away from the direction of bend, or flexion rather. So if the horse is flexed to the right, the horse is moving to the left, okay? So it's always going to be the inside legs that are doing the crossing over. It's the inside hind that's engaging and stepping up under the point of weight. In the half pass, as you can see in this diagram here, is the opposite. The horse is moving towards the direction of bend, and it's the outside legs that cross over, and it's the outside hind leg that does the engaging. Now, these two maneuvers on completely opposite end of the training steps, okay? The leg yield is your first and most basic lateral movement, whereas the half pass is pretty much one of the most advanced, okay? This really takes a lot of strength and flexibility for the horse to be able to do a correct half pass, okay? So as you can see in the diagram, the horse is bent to the right. The horse would be, for example, like you might do a half pass across the diagonal. So let's just say the horse just came around the corner and is going to do a half pass across the diagonal to the opposite rail. It's going to be the horse's left hind leg that's stepping under and engaging, okay? So that's quite a bit more difficult, and they're not the same thing. So I do want to clear up that myth a little bit that a lot of people think they're the same thing. Now, moving on to the shoulder in would be the second maneuver in our stair steps up to athleticism. And in the shoulder in, the horse is bent away from the rail if they're traveling down a rail. For example, in this diagram, the rail is on the left side, the horse is bent to the right, so the right is the inside, and it's the inside hind leg that does the engaging. So this is, once the horse has the leg yield down pretty good, the shoulder in isn't too much of a step beyond that. The shoulder in usually just takes a little bit of adjusting from the rider, and then they can usually get a decent shoulder in. So this one isn't too much of a stretch for the horse, but what you're doing is you're starting to really get that hind leg, the inside hind leg, to bear weight a lot more than what it had to do in the leg yield, because it's stepping up underneath the horse's center of gravity, okay? Now, again, like we talked about in the beginning, what defines the movement is the bend and the number of tracks, okay? So the shoulder in is the horse is bent to the right, it's the inside hind leg, and there are 3 tracks, okay? So you have the right front leg on track number 1. On track number 2, you have the left front and the right hind stepping on the same line together. And on track number 3, you have the left hind. Now, if the horse was going to the left, it would be the opposite, obviously. It would be the left hind leg doing the engaging. Now, if you're trying to really develop your eye to be able to see the shoulder in, one of the keys for watching a correct shoulder in is if you're looking straight on, the inside hind leg should virtually disappear behind the outside front. Okay, so you see how on track 2 you've got that left front and right hind on the same line together. So if you were looking at this horse dead on, you should only be able to see the right front on track 1. You would see the left front, but you wouldn't see the right hind because it would be hiding behind it, and then you would see the left hind. So that would be the key, is that looking at this horse straight on, you should only be able to see really 3 legs is the ideal. Now let's go ahead and look at some examples here. Here the horse is going down the rail, is bent to the left, so it's the left hind leg engaging, and you can see that that right front leg almost just about disappears behind the left hind. Now here is a ridden shoulder in down the rail. The horse is bent to the right, and you can't even see that right hind leg at all. It's totally disappeared behind the outside front. So now we'll move on to the reverse shoulder in. So the difference between the reverse shoulder in and the shoulder in is the bend in the horse in relationship to the rail. Okay, they are the same maneuver. As far as what the horse's body does, there is absolutely no difference, okay? It is still the inside hind leg that is engaging. It is still on 3 tracks. It is, like I said, the horse's body does the exact same thing. The reverse shoulder in is, in my opinion, not a necessary step in the stair steps to an athletic horse. It is really more so almost a corrective thing, and like I said, in my opinion, the difference in it is that the horse is bent towards the rail, and so you can use that for horses that when you're trying to do a shoulder in, and if they really just get too forward or they're not wanting to step under enough, just some various problem solving things, you may go to the reverse shoulder in to use, because the horse's nose is pointed towards the rail. It usually helps keep the horse that's overly forward, keeps them together better. But like I said, it's not a necessary maneuver. It's not harmful in any way. If you're doing it correctly, you could use it on any horse, but it's not something that I would say has to be accomplished before moving on. Like I said, the shoulder in is the same thing as the reverse shoulder in. It's just the bend in relationship to the rail. And so in the shoulder in, the horse was bent to the right and the rail was on the left side, so the horse was bent away from the rail. In the reverse shoulder in, the horse is bent towards the rail. So in this example, in this diagram here, the horse is bent to the left, even though the rail's on the left, so his nose is pointed towards the rail. On track number 1, you have the left front. Track number 2, left hind and right front. Track number 3, right hind. Now, the reason the shoulder in, though, that I wanted to make sure the reverse shoulder in that you really understood it, is because it is definitely not the same as a haunches in. You may think, just from the sounds of it, say, well, the haunches are towards the inside, so wouldn't that be a haunches in? But it's definitely not the same. So I wanted to make sure you had a good understanding of the reverse shoulder in, so when we go next to the haunches in, you can see the difference. So let's go ahead and look at some examples here. Going along the rail, the left hind is stepping on the same track as the right front, just about. And one of the pitfalls, and kind of what is being shown here, of the reverse shoulder in, is that the horse tends to swing the hind end out too much and get into more of a leg yield. And so it can be a little bit harder to keep the horse on only the 3 tracks. Okay, now here's being ridden. And again, kind of swinging the butt a little bit too much, and then right there is on a nice, perfect 3 tracks. You can't even see that outside front leg at all. Okay, and then coming back the other way, so the horse is bent to the left, and it's going to be that left hind leg that's doing the engaging. And you can really see the 3 tracks there. That left hind leg virtually disappears behind the right front. And the whole point, too, of the shoulder in, as we talked about, you're engaging that inside hind leg, but you also are freeing up the shoulder at the same time, too, because you're bringing the shoulder off of the track a little bit, and you're getting that inside front leg to step over, and so you're starting to also really kind of get the horse to start to take some of the weight off of the front, because you're really freeing up those front legs. Now, moving on to the haunches in, or also called the traverse classically. You can see in the diagram, the horse is bent to the right in this example, and the horse is on 4 tracks. Now that's very important, and that's one of the differences between the haunches in and the reverse shoulder in, is that the horse is on 4 tracks, whereas the shoulder in or the reverse shoulder in, the horse is always on 3. In the haunches in, the horse should always be on 4 tracks, okay? And now it's the outside hind leg that is engaging, okay? So you have on the track number 1, you have the right hind leg. On track number 2, you have the left hind leg. On track number 3, you have the right front. And track number 4, you have the left front, okay? So you can see that outside hind leg is really doing a lot of work there, stepping up under that point of weight. And that's quite a bit harder. Like I had said, it's a pretty easy jump from the leg yield to the shoulder in, but from the shoulder into the haunches in can be quite a bit more difficult, because all this time in the leg yield and shoulder in both, and the reverse shoulder in for that matter, you're always engaging the inside hind, which is quite a bit easier for the horse. Now is the first time that you're asking the horse to really engage the outside hind. So that's quite a bit more difficult for them, okay? Let's go ahead and look at some examples here. Here we are in hand, bent to the left, and it's that right hind leg that's engaging, and you can clearly see all 4 legs the whole time, which is exactly what you want. I would like to see a better walk from her though, and see those hind legs taking a little bit better steps to get the full gymnastic benefit of this exercise. And then I'm kind of in the way here, I know, but I wanted to show you from the front as well. The horse is bent to the right, and it's that left outside hind leg engaging. Now here it is being ridden down the rail, and again you can clearly see all 4 of the legs. And this is a much better walk going for this now. And you can see why it's called the haunches in, because the haunches get displaced towards the inside. Now coming back the other way. And in the trot. Okay, moving on to the haunches out, or also classically referred to as the renvers. Let's see if you can get this. If you've been really paying attention, it'll make sense to you. The reverse shoulder in is to the shoulder in, what the renvers is to the traverse. Okay, so I'll still explain it to you. You don't have to get too worried just yet. The haunches out, the horse is physically doing the same thing that it did in the haunches in. It's the exact same maneuver. The difference is the horse's bend in relationship to the rail. Just like we talked about, the reverse shoulder in is the same thing as the shoulder in. The only difference is that you point the horse's nose to the rail, and so it's the bend in relationship to the rail is the only difference. If you were out in the middle of the field and had no fences, there would be no distinction between the two. They would be the reverse shoulder and shoulder in would be exactly the same. There would just be you're doing it left or right, and then same thing. It would be haunches in, left or right. There would be no distinction between haunches in and haunches out if there were no rail. Now, most of us though live with an arena. So there is a distinction, and it does help because as you've been schooling your horse along the rail, like most people do, in the haunches in, horses oftentimes get dependent on the rail to hold them together. Okay? So the haunches out is a necessary exercise to prepare the horse for more advanced maneuvers by taking away the rail as a means to, like I said, the horse tends to want to rely on it to kind of hold them together. And so you're getting the horse to have more self-carriage by not being able to rely on that rail, okay? So in the haunches out, the horse is bent towards the rail. It's still 4 tracks. It's still the outside hind that's engaging. The horse's body is doing the same thing. You're just changing their position in relationship to the rail. So in this diagram, the horse is bent to the left. It's the left hind leg on track 1, the right hind on track 2, track 3 is the left front, and track 4 is the right front. So let's look at a couple of examples now. Okay, here it is in hand, and you can see that outside hind leg engaging. And you can definitely see the horse's body is much further away from the rail, and she's having to really keep the line herself, or the rider has to really help the horse keep that straight line, and they can't rely so much on the rail to hold them in that straight line. So now that we've gone through and defined each of the lateral movements, I want to remind you once again, like we talked about at the beginning, the purpose of each of the lateral movements is for gymnasticizing, for making your horse stronger, more supple, and more athletic. Like I talk about with that stair steps to athleticism, that phrase that I keep throwing out there, you start at the bottom with the leg yoke, just getting the horse to start to cross over and move off of your leg and start to get that inside hind leg up underneath them. Then you move on to the shoulder in, which starts to really engage the inside hind leg. Then you move on to the haunches in, which is engaging the outside hind leg. And so the purpose here, if you're noticing the pattern a little bit, you're strengthening each of the hind legs individually, okay? For the overall purpose of eventually getting real true collection where both hind legs can equally engage and really take on that load of the rider, okay? But you have to start by teaching each leg to engage, and you're going to find that your horse is going to have a weaker side and a stronger side. And so, like we talked about, you tailor your horse's individual training program, or rather workout program, depending on which side needs more strengthening and which side needs more suppling, okay? And so the side that's strong, the horse actually tends to bend better to that side because the muscles, which I know doesn't seem to make sense at first, but if you bear with me, if the left side is strong, for the horse to bend to the left, the muscles on the left side of the horse's top line are contracting, and the horse's right side is stretching. The muscles along the top line is being stretched. For the horse that, again, still the same horse, is stronger on the left side, for the horse to bend to the right, the muscles along the right side of his top line would have to contract, which is harder for them, and the horses on the left side of his top line would have to stretch, which is harder for them. So, like I said, you tailor your horse's workout program depending on which side needs more stretching and which side needs more strengthening. And so then you bend your horse and you do exercises that bend your horse towards the direction that they need more work. And then you'll also find that one hind leg is going to be weaker than the other. And so you may do more shoulder into the right and more haunches into the left to strengthen that right hind leg, for example. Eventually, the idea is that you get to the point where your horse can do these exercises completely equally on both sides. There is no difference. The horse is just as good to the left as they are to the right. They're just as strong, just as supple, can bend both ways, and can engage both hind legs just as well. At that point, from the haunches in, and then you work on the haunches out, and you get a really good haunches in and really good haunches out, and you've got the horse can really step under their point of weight. Then you start to work on collecting your gaits. You would move on to the half pass that I gave you a diagram for earlier, contrasting it to the leg yield. Then you get the half pass, which is basically a haunches in on a diagonal line, is basically all that is. And once you've got that, that's the end of your, what we would call your lateral movements. Once you have really accomplished that thoroughly, then you can really start to get true collection through your piaffe and passage. And then when you get to the point where the horse rocks 100% of the weight onto the hind end is what we would call the levade. Okay, and that's just where the horse, like I said, rocks all of their weight onto the hind and gently lifts up the front, which is not the same as a rear. In the rear, the horse has a locked stifle, and in the levade, all of the horse's joints of the hind leg are flexed. Okay, and that's the important part, is that as you're going through these stair steps up to athleticism, and as you're working on these lateral movements, you're getting those hind legs to be able to flex and to take more of that weight, and you're coiling the springs of that horse and really getting their suspension working really well. And so the levade is just the manifestation of having that suspension working 100% as much as it possibly can. And any horse with enough time can eventually get to the point where they can perform a piaffe and levade, in my opinion. Any reasonably sound horse. It may take several years, and it does, even for the most naturally talented horses, take several years of classical training. But if you're really committed and follow through with the classical principles, any horse could, like I said, get to the point of doing piaffe and levade and that 100% collection. Even for the leisure rider, though, or the weekend rider, or just people that want to have fun, or if you're just more focused on other Western disciplines, even if you never plan on getting to the piaffe and levat, these maneuvers, especially, like I said, the shoulder in and the haunches in would be the main things that I would encourage you to focus on and get as far as you can with them to really be able to use those to flex the strong side, strengthen the weak side, and really start to get that horse using their hind end. Because, as I said before, whatever discipline that you do, your horse is going to last longer and be better able and more capable to do the job that you're asking of them if they're better balanced and better able to carry the weight. So in videos coming up, we will work on each maneuver, and I'll show you how to teach them in hand, what the cues are when you're riding, and all those sorts of things. But I want to make sure that you had this video first that you could refer back to, so you really understood why we do lateral movements, why we do them in the order that they're done in, and also that you have, like I said, you have that reference point that you really understand the definition of each. You have some diagrams and you have some examples, and you can go back through this video anytime that you have questions about them, and it can just be a good reference point for you. So hopefully you'll come back for the other videos where we talk about teaching each one, and we can continue to work on balancing our horses together.